I was looking over at someone, and it was great because they had screened windows and so forth, and I was hearing laughter coming out of the car. Actually, when I drove by, and I was like, "Oh, that's awesome, man!" Actually, hearing people laughing, driving in this traffic, and then I looked over, and they were in just pure hysterics, and then literally, like, they moved forward, and then a car came up next to them, and I looked over the guy, and it was as if he just like murdered millions or something. I mean, he looked so enraged, and I was thinking, this is the deal. This is the deal. Every day of the week, every time we get on the roads, every time we go to work, every time we see our roommates or our loved ones. So this is the reason why some of us are here. Some of us are here. Because the idea is the fact of, if that's the case, if that's how things are working, that's what we're seeing in our world, then it's really an unbelievable blessing to actually have something that you can do about it, that just you can do about it. Because beside that, that's the only thing that really matters. I mean, because everything that you are experiencing is your world. So even though I was looking over at the people in hysterics, and I wasn't feeling particularly hysterical at that time, so it was nice. And when I saw the guy who was enraged, I wasn't feeling that kind of anger either. But then you can find that there's a way that you can use both, use both for your life, to brighten that up. So up here we have the wonderful penmanship of Lily of the Lojong meditation. Up at the top is a URL, aci-dharma.org, and that's where a lot of the materials for this class are. So if you want to write that down, when you go to the website, actually on the left side you'll see a couple of menus, and there's a group called Daily Practices. And this particular practice is Daily Practice 4. And that'll take you to where there are the reading and homeworks and answers. So I just said homework, and hopefully that doesn't bring up affliction immediately in anybody's mind. If you're someone that tends to not remember everything that you hear, such as myself, or you like to deepen your understanding of how to live in a constant state of joy, then do the homeworks. Do the homeworks, because they're actually quite simple. They're actually quite simple, and it will very much help you to concentrate on what we're going to be doing. The reading as well, some of it might seem a little bit cryptic or esoteric. There are a number of reasons for this. This is something that's been passed down for centuries, and we're very, very fortunate that there was a Tibetan Lama who was in New Jersey that decided to do the commentary on it and actually put it in a way that we could actually understand it somewhat. But over the course of the next few weeks, we'll start to unpack it. So don't be concerned, don't worry about it like when you read something and you're like, examine the unborn natural awareness of the mind, and just think, what the hell does that mean? So don't stress about it at all. We will do our best to really get to what that means on a really simple, basic level. It says a lot by the fact that you're here tonight, and everybody who's online as well. Because if you are here, you must have a heart, and a very special one at that. And that is a rare and precious jewel. I mean, we tend to think in this particular mindset of Tibetan Buddhism that the heart really is where everything is coming from, that the heart really is your mind. And so therefore, the quality of how you think about the world, and how you feel about the world, and how things are happening are all flowing from here. And it's a beautiful thing that the Tibetans actually do, that when they're thinking or when they refer to their minds, they point to their hearts. And it's one of these kind of beautiful flowerings that we have between being here in America and taking what's coming over from Asia to see how, we tend to be so up here. And just the physical gesture of dropping that down to here, you can get a lot of mileage out of that. So as we start to get into the meditations, when you start to actually try to visualize working from here and not so much from up here, because we've been doing that for years and we know what that's like, very well. And we also realize how what we see can often deceive us in this way. But it might be something else to start trying to visualize from here. As foreign or odd or awkward as that might feel initially, over time it could start to pay off in a very, very beautiful way. Just aside from just getting you out of your head. I mean, that's so much of what this entire practice is about, is just getting out of your head. This is a very, very big thing in the craft of acting, is they talk about, you go in to do a scene and so forth, and you've memorized all your lines and whatnot, and then you go in there and you do your lines and you know what the intention is and what you're supposed to do in this scene, and it doesn't have any life. And immediately, though, as soon as you stop thinking about it, then suddenly something awakens, and suddenly it is alive. And that's exactly what this practice is about. And that's why we're also kind of bringing it into the heart as well. I mean, each of our hearts has a history to it. And for our purposes here, what we can do is we can call that history karma in that sense, which is, there's so many wonderful definitions for it. But if you think about it as if it's an ongoing stream of your past actions which are really propelling your life, that's what's actually propelling your life forward, is how you've behaved before. And you relegate that to your heart, then what this practice can do for you is that it can start to purify those past actions, and that starts to purify your mind, and that starts to purify your world. And you'll start seeing it. I mean, that's, I wouldn't be sitting here, and I certainly wouldn't have asked any of you to come unless it's something that I had personally practiced myself and had just an inch of success with. Success in terms of my own definition of that, which was really thinking about others first. With what, just at some point in the day to actually have a few moments where I actually put the consideration of what was going on for someone else before my own. And that's how you can start to see your world changing in that way. Because then suddenly someone comes up to you and driving on the 405 and lets you into the lane. I mean, it's sometimes the most simple actions is just recognizing that. And that only could have happened because of that you had done that before to someone else. And once you start really bringing that to your way of thinking throughout the day, that this is how things are working, I do something and there's a reaction to whatever I do. If I say something, there's a reaction to that. The way I think, there's a reaction to the way I'm thinking about something. Then that's how this practice will really get traction for you. Because you don't have to label it as that, I believe in karma and that's how things are working. It's much more about just seeing how it really is working for you. Because certainly if you're not seeing it that way, then there's no reason to do the practice at all. It really does become something that just distracts you, actually, from what the truth is. So it's really important as well to just be kind with yourself as you're taking these on. I mean, there are, I think, around 30 to 40 Lojongs through kind of the history of Buddhism. And we have this particular one, which is the 7-point practice. And it's something where it is known as a sweet spot in Buddhism. There are many highly realized teachers who truly believe that it's like, yeah, you could do this for life. You can just practice this one simple word for life, and you will be pretty damn happy all of the time. And that shows the power of it, and it's also very precise, and it's also practical, which is really really applicable for us here, especially living life anywhere in this country that, we need that. We need it to be concise in that way, and really something that we can start doing tomorrow morning or tonight. And it also, we start to get some stoke out of that when we start doing it. That's one of the many ways that it's an unbelievable blessing for us. We're going to focus, as the title says, on actually the technique of meditation, and then also the subject that we're going to meditate on. And it's an important question to say, okay, well, why meditate? Why do we necessarily need to meditate on this? I mean, why can't you just go buy a great book, in the kind of few remaining bookstores that exist, and, or do anything that, you meet someone and they've got a practice similar to this, and they kind of talk to you about it, and you try a few things out and so forth. But the reason we use the vehicle of meditation is primarily because what you focus your mind on affects how you see the world. And that's exactly what meditation is doing. I mean, in this sense, it functions like a microscope. So you're actually applying your focus to something, and the whole idea is that you want to see whatever that subject is greater. You want to see it larger. And it's important to realize that meditation doesn't insulate you from reality. It doesn't insulate you from what's going on. It actually penetrates it. That's what the focus does. And in that sense, when it penetrates the truth of what's going on, then that opens you up. And in the process can seem quite distracted, just trying to just stay focused on something for 5 seconds. But you build that up. You just keep building that up. And that's, of course, why we're here. It serves a much greater purpose when you are using the meditation to focus on a subject, which can actually lead to making your life happier. Because there are fantastic meditation practices that don't really have a subject per se, that are really about calming and centering yourself and then focusing, which is a very, very important technique and skill to have. And what we're doing here is that now we're going to bring a subject into it where it's like, okay, this subject is actually going to lead to you like being able to drive down the 405 and be happy the whole way to where you get to. That's really where we get the sense of earth, the earthiness of this practice. Ooh, never heard that before. It's a delightful sound. It's fine. Yeah, don't worry, please. Please, please. So yeah, this whole practice was spoken for the first time about 25 years ago from someone called the Buddha, a very, very credible source, for some people, if you have any doubts about that. And it's truthfully been passed on generation to generation ever since then, on down to you tonight. And it's really considered to be a blessing just to be able to hear the word that was initially spoken by this enlightened being, and that's traveled in all its forms for hundreds upon hundreds of years. So we'll say this together because it really is a blessing to do. So the first part of it is lo, and the second, Zhong. Lojong. Awesome. 2,500 years. Lo it actually means many things. It means many, many things. For our purposes here, lo would mean mind or heart or ultimate love. And Zhong can mean practice, or to develop, or to make something pure. And really, Lojong it's practicing a special state of mind. I mean, in some ways, it's learning to practice thinking like what we call a bodhisattva, which is really a bodhisattva. I mean, there's so many fun ways to describe this term, but ultimately, this is a person, a living being, whose only real concern 24 hours a day is the welfare of all living beings. That's pretty much why they're waking up. And that's what's going on in their mind throughout the day and night. And some would even say, depending how far along in the path you are, even while they're sleeping, they're thinking about this. They have that level of power. And that's really what this practice is all about, is just practicing how to think like that. Because if you can think in that way, if you can think in a way where, and this isn't, by the way, the kind of axiom of like, oh, I really don't care about myself at all. Because the key part about that is to say that the bodhisattva cares about the well-being of all living beings. That includes yourself. And that's a very important distinction to realize, is that you're a part of the whole mix. So you couldn't be the vehicle of helping others and being a source of happiness in this world unless you had that kind of consideration for yourself. So it's very important to realize that as we start to get deeper and deeper into this, like a person's going to be like, well, what about me? Like, I have a headache. I have a headache, and I just want to take some Tylenol and deal with my headache. And what's great is there's a practice in here that will show you how you can take care of others while you have a headache. I mean, and I'll tell you what, I love that one. because ultimately I'll just get, cut to the chase with so much of this, is that the reason that we ultimately experience suffering and pain is because we're focused on ourselves. I mean, that's the nature of pain. If someone kicks you in the knee, who hurts? You hurt, and you're the one that recognizes that. And we'll get into the deeper subtext of that, of how that's happening. But the key here is that you will be finding ways in which, no matter what kind of emotional downfall you might be in, what you can do with that for other beings. Because that's and we'll take that all the way to death. We'll take that all the way to that degree, which for pretty much, I'm not speaking for anyone here, but at least for me, that's pretty much the pole that I work from. So it's like, okay, if I'm trying to help someone who's in the process of dying, for instance, as gets revealed, I think, in the second or third point of the practice is about turning problems into the path for yourself. And so this morning I got an email from my mom, and the subject said blood counts, and then I opened it up and it said problems, call me. So, and my mom she got diagnosed with leukemia in the early 90s, and then she's been in remission for nearly about 15 years. And so, how fitting it was to wake up this morning and see that. Literally in plain English, problems, call me. And so immediately in that moment, truthfully, what came up emotionally was just this, is there's something very bad that could happen with this. And this is where the rubber meets the road with this. Is because immediately of having that feeling, and there's nothing self-existently wrong with having this feeling of concern and urgency, but now what are you going to do with it? So I could have totally, went into a rabbit hole of worry and concern over that. But honestly, because of what we're going to be talking about and meditating on in this practice, I was able to call her and actually do something, to see myself trying to do something instead of just freaking out. So that's one of the many reasons why we're here. And quite honestly, when you start doing this earnestly with a little bit of consistency, it's like sunshine and cupcakes for like the first few weeks or something like that. It really is like dessert. It's a beautiful kind of taste of the power of it. But then what starts to happen is after a few weeks, and we'll be together for those few weeks, so we can certainly take refuge in each other. But then when you'll start to get down to the real tendency to think about how you cherish yourself. That's what'll you'll start seeing that. Like, ooh, I didn't even realize I thought about myself in that way, that I really took care of myself in this way before I'd even think about someone else. And then you'll start wrestling. In some ways, that's when they say, that's when it's on, that's when it's on. And you start really planting some really good impressions in your heart as to you're discovering the certain ways that you particularly cherish yourself. And it's like, okay, all right, now immediately I've got to Lojong this, and that's great because that's when Lojong actually becomes a verb. You can find yourself almost even saying it sometimes, like, yeah, I need to Lojong that dude. Like immediately, or it's going to just be more trouble for me. And that's where it comes back to you again, and that's the enlightened, this often heard phrase that you'll hear, this enlightened self-interest, because it's going to be more trouble for you. It's going to be more suffering for you, because that you didn't try to do something about it. But fortunately, everyone who's here is. So there is, it's funny in some ways, thinking about it in that context, you could say that this is just a training course in how to stop thinking about yourself all the time, Because at a very core level, that it is so deeply imbued into our nature. You know, I'm hungry. I'm breathing. I mean, this is the whole kind of what we would consider to be the core karma of the breath is your attachment to what you construe to be your life and how your life is functioning. And what goes much more deeply behind that is this fear of the end of that. So you breathe. And it's one of the most beautiful things when you're meditating, because you will get to this place where your breath gets so refined and that you will actually get to the point where you're not thinking about it. And it is happening. It is happening. And eventually, well, as they say, eventually you're just enlightened. You've forced yourself because of how well you've been making use of breathing at a really fundamental level. Because what that says is how well you've been making the use of your life has brought you to the point where you don't have there's no more attachment to that anymore. You know, you're no longer cherishing yourself in that sense anymore. So yes, this goes back about 2,500 years ago, and truthfully, for about half of that time, about 1,600 years, it was kept in secret. I mean, it was really just a person-to-person lineage or tradition to pass this teaching on. And we're gonna get into why that is. It was for a very, very good reason. The root text that we'll be using is actually called the 7-Step Practice for Developing a Good Heart. And the first person who did, fortunately, write it down around 1150 was a Kadampa Lama, who's Kadampa is another lineage of Buddhism, and his name was Geshe Chikawa, which is Chekawa. And he lived from 1101 to 1175. And we are unbelievably blessed that one of our lineage lamas who I'd mentioned earlier wrote down the commentary for it, Kin Rinpoche, he's the guy under His Holiness there. So when you're looking at the reading and so forth, he's the one that so graciously took the time to write what the heck is going on in there. It's amazing, actually, because Geshe Chikawa, since he was the one that broke the teaching open in a way, because from the time that the Buddha spoke it and passed it on, and it went from the Buddha to this amazing enlightened being called Maitreya, and then it went on for 16 centuries. But then when it came to Geshe Chikawa, he administered to lepers a lot in this region of Tibet, and what he found was that once there was, I don't know if it was, I think it was, he was doing one-on-one teachings with some of the lepers, throughout the countryside. And there's an essential ingredient about this that we will eventually talk about, which is referred to as emptiness, which you can also think of as the ultimate nature of reality, how things are really working. So he started teaching to the lepers about this aspect of it. And then, it always comes down to this, and that is, what are you seeing happening in people's lives? is this doing anything? Do you see them any happier? In this particular case, what he started to see happening was that the lepers were curing themselves of leprosy. He literally started seeing these people coming back to him just completely with clean, smooth skin. And so at that point, he realized that there are people that are ready to hear this publicly. And that gets into, okay, so why? Why for all that time was it being kept such a secret? And the truth is like up until that point, the lamas were looking around, the lamas, the teachers who had this wisdom were looking around in the villages and watching how people were behaving. And they could see that, or it's better to say that they could discern that people would take the teachings in the wrong way. That people would perceive it as letting others take advantage of them. And so out of their kindness, out of their compassion for others, they decided like, well, we don't want people to take this really powerful practice, this really powerful wisdom, and create what they believe to be bad karma for themselves. So that then we take something like this, and because they have a misperception about how it's working, that then they would create all of this bad association, this bad energy, bad impressions in their minds and their hearts about how it works. So it was actually out of their love for people. It's just like, no, we won't we won't give you some like a bomb that you're going to explode, in your life that's really going to wreak havoc in it. And so, this is the kind of, and this is why all of you who are here tonight, it's so incredible, because there are still many people who would start to get into this or look at it on a surface level, because they really wouldn't, once you look at it initially, if you start to think, well, this is foolish, or it's naive, it's totally a naive way of thinking, then immediately, you're not going to penetrate it. You're not going to go deeper into trying to understand it. So this is why it takes a rare leap of intellect to be able to realize what's going on with this. Because particularly for us here, this country was very much, founded on rugged individualism. And there are very, very healthy aspects of that, such as that you take responsibility for your own life. And that is central to this practice. You're taking full-on responsibility, not only for your life, but on everything else that you're perceiving. And that's the jump, that's the leap, is that immediately when you'd say to someone like, well, if the only way for you to be happy is to stop thinking about you so much, depending on what we would say your karma, there are some people who be like, what? Like, first, that makes no sense, and secondly, like, now that you've explained it to me, I don't really want to do that, and it's, or that if you work in a corporation, you work in a business, and you go in and you say, I'd like to have a meeting with the CEO, and you sit down with him and you're like, all right, you say to her, I have this great idea, which is that if you have an individual meeting with every employee, and you ask each of them what it is that they hope, that they really deeply wish that they want to achieve in their career, and what they want to happen to make a really, really happy life for themselves. So you do that, you sit down, you have that one-on-one meeting with everybody in the company, and then you take all of those responses and you make that the entire central focus of the mission of the company. You formulate everything off of that. So there are many CEOs that you would not possibly be fired, or definitely dismissed, or, maybe they would be even polite enough to say, thanks. And we'll get back to you on that. And then you get called in by your immediate boss, and then you have a different kind of meeting. But that's kind of what we're talking about here. That's why so when you take this back to the Tibetan village in the Himalayas in, the year 900, and you're going up to someone and you're saying, Jam Young, it'd be really great if you actually gave your yak to him, and I know you'll be left without a yak, but that'll be the best thing you could do for you right now, Why Jam Young would spit, on your face or something like that. This is why they said, okay, we need to give this some more time. We need to give this some more time. So we are very fortunate. We're very fortunate that enough people have recognized the benefits of it so that we could have it here tonight. Because it'd be so easy that would not be the case. So it's always important, at least in my way of thinking, is to be like, okay, what are the benefits then of this? Let's really get into the benefits of it. And as it pertains specifically as into developing a kind, loving heart that's just loving all the time. It doesn't know anything else but how to love. And when we say that, that's your mind. That's all it knows is how to love. In a way, you could say that there are kind of two access points for compassion in your heart. One of them is really obvious, which is it's where the love shines through. For your partner, for sunshine, for cupcakes, that's one entry, that's one portal where it flows out of that. The other one is a little bit more seemingly kind of hidden to us, which is that it's where we hurt. It's precisely there where the pain is in our heart, where we hurt. Now, why is that? Because that place where we hurt is precisely the place where we heal. It's directly through there. So, and that's a place of great vulnerability. And that vulnerability is opening. And that's kind of like when you can think about, I'm vulnerable right now. It's because you're open. And what so many of us do is that, we kind of almost give this kind of fearful sensation to being vulnerable. Is that, because somebody could hurt me, that, I'm liable to be hurt in this moment. And that's exactly why we have this. Because when we realize that it's actually right in that place in our heart, because we know that love access point so well. But that place where we suffer, that's where it starts to get into kind of 180-degree thinking. Of that, it's in this moment where I'm feeling a lot of suffering right now, that actually it's right through here that the compassion can flow. And when you start to think about it on a deeper level, you'll see that is the case. That is what compassion is. You see something, you see someone in an afflicted state, someone who's angry or upset, and suddenly your heart feels compelled to want to help them. And that place right in your heart is because it knows that hurt. It senses it, it sees it, and it's aware of it. And so what we're going to do here is just we're going to really, really strengthen our awareness to that, so that we can use it as powerfully as we do when it's sunshine and cupcakes, the same way. So that eventually it gets to the point where, those kind of like those two places in the heart, that's just becomes one. And you don't even need a distinction anymore. But initially, for a lot of us, we need that distinction. Initially, we need to recognize that. Yeah, Shakespeare said, "The quality of mercy is not strained. It falleth as the gentle rain from heaven." And I love this so much because this is where you see how the openness, that vulnerability, that compassion that we have, then doesn't become a struggle anymore. Because we have those moments where it's like, I want to help them out, but, I have a headache, and when you really come to understand that the quality of mercy is not strained, when you really fully understand it in your heart and in your mind, it doesn't become an obstacle anymore. There is a great teacher in the Shambhala tradition, the founder of it, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and he had this to say about the Lojong practice in this sense. The approach to moral action is one of removing obstacles of limited vision, fear, and self-clinging, so that one's actions are not burdened by the weight of self-concern and expectations. That's perfect. Especially that part about expectations. We do something and we are happy to do it, and we hope that it helps a person, and all we want is a thank you. How many times have we said that? Just a thank you would be nice. Now, if you're at that level most of the time and everything that you're doing pretty damn good. Versus like, next time I hope they remember that, if you're just at that point, then, that's a pretty good place. But I'm sure you can see, even within that, there's still a little clinging to who did that, who just helped them out. I did, so that, and it was just this kind of like this really itsy beeny, teeny weeny expectation of just a thank you. Or you open the door, for someone, and then I love this. I used to, when I was living and working in Manhattan, and I was working at Macy's. So this is like 34th and 7th, so people are flying in the doors, insanely. So it's like, talk about like a compassion machine. Is this like work the door at Macy's, on 34th and 7th. And I can remember who this good friend of mine, and she was, very considerate, very compassionate person. And I'll never forget how many times she would like open the door and like, people were just rifling in. It was like she could have been there for days holding this door until like finally someone would stop, and be like, "Oh, hey, let me hold the door for you." And she would go in, and this is after and I think, man, she's got so much great karma here. This happened. There must have been 34 people that passed through that door. And then we go to the next door, and she's like, "And can you believe no one just even stopped to hold the door for me?" And I thought like, oh man, and the thing is that that's so great for me personally, because I realize that that's coming from me. That's not coming from her. I'm the one that's seeing that happen. So it's what's going on in my mind as I was seeing that happen, and then it was perfectly manifest. Because I was thinking that way about it, because this is how she had acted in the past. So you can see how it starts to, it gets really refined, and that's the elegance of it, of when it is working, because then it gets to the point where you know, it's hard to put words to it, but it's more of like a feeling of when someone is doing something for you. Like someone put out this, this wonderful cup of water for me, and it's fully realizing the complete balance of that I only could have got that by giving someone else a cup of water when they needed it, and you start to it's like this it's like a little kind of tickle, that you really start to just enjoy it. You enjoy seeing how it's working. You enjoy seeing how it's working. And that's, of course, what ultimately leads to what they're saying with this, which is that, and then you're in a happy state of mind all the time. And because I think, when you hear things like this, like, I'm going to be happy all the time. I mean, it's so easy for the cynicism to just jump all over that. Please, come on. And that's what's great, is that there's going to be lines in this text that you're going to be able to do to just totally slap yourself in the face when you do that, in this like really loving way, as to like, yeah, that's how you've been thinking, your whole life. And now we're going to do something a little bit different, I'm thirsty. I'm going to give Jose a glass of water first. And if it starts out with you saying, I'm going to give it to him first, because I know that's the only way I can get a glass of water, but I'm not going to sit here and wait until someone brings me a glass of water and then like go into dehydration and die. That it doesn't get to that kind of, you're not going to that extremity. But in a way, it's really great to like play with your own mind in that way. Because the mind will throw up that cynicism. It will throw it right back of like, all right, this is good, this is fun. But at a certain point, it's like, I'm going to go get myself a glass of water, because that's what I need. Which you can absolutely do, particularly when you're just thinking this in your head. It keeps coming back to just how are you thinking? How are you thinking? From there is then how you'll start acting. And it becomes fluid. It becomes fluid at that point. So I'll tell you what, before we get into, what we'll do is we'll kind of do an overview of the 7 points, because when you start to read this, and you see the 4 acts are the supreme method, that you could have Veronica's face right there, which is what? So we'll touch upon them in general to just kind of put it in a very practical sense of what each point means, and then we'll get into a good meditation to start off with. Yeah.
Quick question, because I think a lot of this, because I think we all have it, and I know at least for me, the cynicism about being happy is the thing, emotional blandness, and I know it's not that, but I mean, and I guess it's something that we'll get into more, but I was just wondering if you could speak on that it doesn't mean that you just always feel kind of in this, dopamine happiness state all the time, where you don't have any type of variance in what you're feeling.
Yeah, what's really great about this is that it will totally redefine your concept of what happiness is, because that concept right there is that there is a difference. There is a difference in the sense of like, that just seems like you're flatlined, but it's a whole other mindset when you have joy. You feel a deep sense of contentment with the way things are working when you see suffering in the world. And that's exactly what this practice will do. is really, because this is something, personally that's really, very much, come for both Mira and I, something that's really opened up is just like, wow, you do not feel good about something. And suddenly there's suddenly this feeling and concept that rises up in your mind that says, wow, and you know what? And this is happiness. This is some sense of what they are talking about when the enlightened ones say, and it's all good. This is what they're getting at. It is all good, with the right attitude, with the right wisdom. So that there is no flat line. It never stops changing. It never stops changing, thankfully. Thankfully. It'd be so boring otherwise. So let's take a break, and then we'll come back and get into the 7. which this is actually taken directly from the reading, which is the 7 steps, and then at the back of it is basically, what the most ideal meditation posture is, because I know there are some people that are just starting out in this practice, and it's certainly very good for those that have been doing this for some time to have a nice refresh of that. Because quite honestly, if you can't sit well, meditation's not going to really work out. And when I mean sit well, I mean sit comfortably. Sit in a way that you feel like you can be still and quiet and happy for a certain period of time. So what we're going to do is, like I said, as you're looking at these with 1, 2, 3, 4, the 7 points, as soon as we get past 1, there are many lines. They almost remind me of verses. And this is where I'm talking about. This is where we'll unfold these. And it's awesome because when I was saying to someone earlier that if you go onto Amazon.com and put in Lojong or something like that, I mean there fortunately are a lot of books, and it is it's a practice that has found a root here. I mean there are Alan Wallace, and there are a lot of very amazing practitioners and teachers of this. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, as I was mentioning, Pema Chodron. Pema Chodron's all over this. I mean, this is kind of one of her primary ways of teaching is about Lojong, compassion, also what we call bodhicitta, which is the wish for enlightenment. And often how these lines will be referred to are sort of like as slogans or aphorisms or platitudes or something like that. And what's really, so for instance, if you go and you open up another book, you might see you might see 1, 2, 3, 4, and it comes down to like 59 lines. This is one of the things that I love so much about this, is that they have put it together in the form of a practice, so that it becomes not only just something that you are able to get into the intellect and the wisdom of, and trying to understand it, of taking some really poetic line and trying to get, what does that really mean? But they have put it together in such a way, it's like, and then you can go practice it, and that's I think one of the most beautiful aspects of this entire lineage, is it's all about that. It's all about putting this into practice. And for us here, we feel very, very deeply committed here to being able to do that practice in the world. I mean, all of us, each and every one of us has our own karma, has your own ongoing stream of how you've behaved, and you're experiencing how you've behaved in the past every single second. And so it might come up one day that you're like, I need to leave this place and go into a cave or go to the desert and be in a cabin for a long period of time. And that very well could be what you must do, to be able to have the realizations about being able to live a happy life all the time, to have a happy state of mind all the time. For many of us, that isn't the case. For many of us, the case is, I got to be at work tomorrow. I got to show up somewhere, and there are people that are counting on me to do that, or you have kids or something like that. And that's what's so wonderful about this it's about applying this in what we would call your worldly life. It's there. We have all of these obstacles in our mind about what we consider to be like our spiritual life, or our spiritual ideals, and what's going on in the world, and kind of never the twain shall meet. But this is all about the fact of just like all of what you want in the worldly life can be realized through a heart that understands these practices. So, that should be kind of reassuring for some of us, that it's like, okay, so I don't have to give up, everything, and then take myself to the desert or the mountaintop and go into a cave. You don't. And because of how they've put it together in this way, it's something you can start doing tonight. And, our primary way of being able to understand that and being able to really open up our heart and mind to it is going to be meditation. And the first point addresses that directly. It actually says, train yourself first in the preliminaries. Now, what that really means for us practically is to prepare yourself for the main meditation. And this is something that it's really good to get used to, I should say, which is in this particular lineage, they have a love of list love. And there's some people in here that have fun with that list love, and this is, and I will say that for those people that fortunately there's not too many lists in this one, but right away they give us a nice little list that there's actually 3 little preliminary meditations that you can do before the main meditation. And it's not doing all 3 of them, but what it is it's options. So the first one, this is also under the first point, which is that you're preparing your mind for the main meditation. So you want to start off with one of these 3 preliminary meditations. So the first one is called rejoicing. At least that's how I like to refer to it. Which ultimately it translates from the Tibetan as spiritual opportunity. And what you're really doing is you're just thinking about how fortunate you are. I mean, that's ultimately it. What things are going well, the progress you're making in your life. And this is particularly good to do when you're feeling anxious or depressed, dull, listless. It's really good to just think about, what? I'm breathing right now without the use of any kind of machine. You have all your limbs. I mean, hey, be basic. You don't even need to get into what your annual salary is, or something like that. Because you start there, because depending on the state of mind you're in, you will find that when you're sitting down to meditate and you're using this to get focused, that it's I'm so depressed, I can't even think of anything right now. And that's why you'll go to those real basic levels of your life, that you are aware of people who love you. That's huge. To even have the awareness that there are people that love you in this life, especially because loneliness is a killer. I mean, loneliness can send you into the institution. Loneliness can send you into suicide. So to have that awareness, which seems so simple, right? But we very easily can glide over those. And speaking of which, the second preliminary meditation we refer to is death, which, this is what I love about the Tibetans as well, is that they have really got death down. They have done a lot of thinking about death, and it's something that's actually incorporated into the monasteries. So they start, the teenage monks are actually trained, they're put into certain courses and meditations that are focusing on their mortality, on their death, on their impermanence. So, especially, and think about that as a teenager. I mean, I have a cousin who's, just right in the center of the fervor of her teenage years, and, I've seen, just seeing how she reacted when my grandmother, died about 3 years ago, and there was such a level of not knowing how to deal with it on any kind of level. Like, and especially, there was confusion and disorientation and so forth. And that's kind of, that's part and parcel of our culture, is that we hide that. That's what, everything, every cosmetic line, you look younger, stay young, and so forth. It's everywhere, which is about, do not face up to the point that this will end. This thing as your body, and it could be as the beautiful glow of your skin, and so forth, that's going to change. And that's why that's how this can become one of the most profound practices for you, and for any human being for that matter, is because you're able to start to look at that in a way that doesn't upset you, that doesn't scare you so much. They've so beautifully articulated it that you're able to start looking at, like, what is the fact? The fact is, we're born, we're going to die. And that is usually where the base level of karma starts. If someone says, I don't know, cause and effect, yeah, for the most part. Well, it's like, well, so you start there. You start there. I mean, that's the only kind of result that can come from that. What is very, very powerful here is that the lamas, the people who have realized this, they show you a way how to see it, how to think about it, and even more importantly, when it does arise for you, or when you see someone else going through that process, someone who's in the process of being very close to death, how you can be very helpful to them. And that right there, I mean, sometimes it can feel so unsettling at first that kind of motivation can usually kind of straighten people's spines in that way. It's like, okay, if you're having struggle doing that for yourself, then you can start to say, because when I start to see this happening to someone else, I can be of help to them. I mean, that could be the most profound service you could ever do, is in helping someone die well. And that's exactly what this is about, is knowing how to do it well when it does arise. The third is, we just refer to this as suffering. So, now it starts to sound a little bit morbid, like we're going to focus on like death and suffering. Yeah.
Wait, so as a preliminary, how do you help someone die well?
Well, this as a preliminary meditation, you'll be given a practice that will actually be a practice that then you would be able to do with someone who is dying. So it literally would be a meditation practice that you'll be able to articulate with them. So yes, suffering, which is basically the problems that we have in this kind of life, and it's a fact of life, just like joy as well. And once again, it's incredible that they're actually, we've got something here to actually deal with this. So they break it down. Once again, that's the thing about this lineage, is like they get so into the nitty-gritty, like they want to get it so like anything that comes up, they're able to say, okay, here's this. But hey, I have this point. That's number 23 of list 46 of part A of 3, and suddenly you don't care anymore about the fact that it was the 50th list or whatever, when suddenly someone says, and this is what you can do, because that's all we really care about. You suddenly don't care about the list anymore. So there are 3 kinds of suffering. There is the kind of, what we call the straight up suffering. Suffering is suffering, that you stub your toe, you feel sad, you just feel sad. Yeah, it was really important when Geshe Michael, who has taught this so beautifully and perfectly, he says that in examining whether something is good or bad, you need to examine how it ends. If something is happiness or not, does it end happily? And when we look at the truth, in this kind of life, everything fades in that way. Everything changes in that way. So, the intelligence turns to forgetfulness, health turns to sickness at some point, and it shifts again. The truth is that it's ultimately going to be better to face it. But what we're going to be given here is how to face that well, in a way that's going to help us. So the third type is pervasive suffering. And that is the ultimate fact that we are going to die. So that's the deal for anybody that's born. That's the pervasive suffering. And, it's the one where, I love they use this this kind of scenario where it's the one where, a couple generations later, not even a generation later, it can be 20 years after someone has passed, and they pull, you pull out a family photo and they look at that and they're like, who is, does anybody even know who this is? And they look at it and they're like, no. And that's not meant, that's not meant to bring you down. Once again, it's like His Holiness says this as well. He's like, the important part is that you look at that, this is how things are working. That that your name and all of that will be let go of, ultimately. So then that puts even more emphasis on what it is you're doing now. That's what can get you up out of bed, is when you really start to realize that fact. So now we can go actually onto the second point. So you'll see there's many verses here. Learn to see all things as a dream. Examine the nature of the mind unborn. We'll get into what that means. But all of what the second point addresses is learn to love another person as much as yourself. Most simply. That's most simply it. When you think about just think about it. How many minutes today do you think you were really thinking about the welfare of someone else? For however many hours you're awake in a given day, how much are you thinking about the well-being of someone else? What is extraordinary is that when you get really good at this, that's going to be the majority of your waking hours. You will be forced by your own mind to keep thinking that way. And it is priceless in that sense. The third point, which is quite clear as it is there, which is really about the one of turning your problems into opportunities. And this is something with, because ultimately, everybody's got opportunity, right? That's just the nature of what an opportunity is. But with this practice, you can turn trouble for yourself into an opportunity. And it ends up being an awesome skill, particularly for your business life and for your personal, your family life as well. The fourth point, I love the way they articulate this actually, is basically just how to do meditation all day long. How to be in a meditative state of mind all day long. So that basically you're living a meditative life. And so for some, this might be the point that you're like, yes, I want that. That's the point I'm going to focus on. It ultimately directly connects to how well you will deal with dying and helping others in that process, is where this point will go deeply into that. Because someone who's in that state of mind all the time has very much shifted their attachment to themselves and why they're here and what the purpose and meaning of their life is. And that's the key, as you'll see, as to helping in the death process. The fifth point is very simple: how to know when you've succeeded in developing a good heart. There actually are signs for this, which is good to be able to see those signs, because at a certain point you will need this. You'll very much need it to be like, okay, am I getting better at this thing? Because I'm a little bit unsure. The sixth point are really special commitments that you'll make to do throughout the course of your day, kind of on a very simple level. And these are, there's a lot of fun ones with this. I mean, some of them get into, almost seem like magic, It'll seem like magic until, magic to you. What you used to think as before as magic becomes just kind of like your normal way of being. And so, yeah, there's a lot of fun things that you, throughout the course of the day, you're like, I'm going to focus on this one. I'm just going to do this. Like, or I'm going into a meeting, and I'm going to just do this practice, and no one else is going to know that I'm doing it. And then you kind of get into that kind of like, you'll feel a little kind of mischievous in a way, being good, which is a lot of fun. And the seventh and final point is where you receive special advices from a teacher that you truthfully can only get from a living human being, and not a book. And this is, this is something that makes sense, right? Of course, on many levels, but it's very easy for us to lose what we would say the karma for that, to realize how important it is that you get with someone who can teach you something as opposed to a book. There is something at a very deep, subtle level about what is transmitted between our bodies and our minds, between someone who we see as a teacher. And it can be, you can see this in your life when you look back and, you had anyone that you can think of in your life. Could be, your mother or father that you feel has taught you something, or a particular, teacher while you were in school. And there's just something that clicks and you get it. And it's and that kind of connection is priceless. And so once you tap into that, what you're tapping into is actually something that's eternal. There is no limitation to that. So once you actually understand that, like, wow, okay, here is this, amazing person, and you make this connection with them, and you realize the fact that, like, there is something being communicated here on a level of which I don't even really comprehend, but it's happening. There's something that's compelling me to continue to keep listening to them. And then you let go of even asking why, because you're like, yeah, the why has actually been an obstacle, because something more deeper knows it. So all you're trying to do is actually kind of drop this mind down in your heart to get to unify the two. And until that time, you keep working with this person. I mean, it is in some ways true wisdom, though it's realized by one person, it can only happen by the meeting of two. And when I mean that meeting of two can be a concept. There has to be something that you're focusing on, and then those two have to unify, and then there's knowledge. Then there's wisdom. And that's something that, even though it's being realized by one person, and that's what we'll get into. We'll get into how that's working and what makes that possible. So those are the 7, and it's really great because you're going to be able to do them. Like, you could just choose to do like one point each day of the week. So it's kind of nice they did 7. I don't know if they were really thinking that way of like, all right, so everybody, you can get up each day, and I'm going to focus on point 4 today. So Monday through Sunday, it can work beautifully that way. And, I think it's very important that we realize once again why we're all here, which is that we're here to open our hearts. We're here to live within our hearts, and that is not something that is anything but empowering. I think there's obviously been there's some level of cynicism that they've been able to co-opt hearing someone say, that person is sensitive, and that can actually, you can actually have the understanding to think that that's a weakness, or that person is all heart, and doesn't think with their head. There's all these ways we flipped it. We flipped it around. And so, that's one of the reasons why we're here, is to actually show, well, actually, that's where all the real power is. That's where all the real power is. That's where all the wisdom is. That's where all the compassion is in that place, in our heart. So we're going to do this meditation focusing on probably the most simple way to be in a loving relationship with our hearts, which is with our breath. So we will get into our favorite position. So this, for those of us who are just starting this, it is ultimately important to be sitting comfortably. So you can be on a cushion, you can be in a chair. It's most important that you feel comfortable for sitting, sitting for a few minutes. And, obviously if you are on the floor, that it's usually preferable that you do have a cushion to raise your hips up a little bit, so that it doesn't put it takes pressure off the hips, and it also doesn't put too much pressure on the knees. You can have your legs crossed. You can do the full lotus if that feels comfortable. And then particularly with just how the positioning of your hands and your arms, which is that the traditional way is that you can have them resting in your lap. If that feels good for you, that you can have the right hand resting upon the left, if that feels good, or you can just sit them on your thighs. It's all about what just totally feels comfortable. And then probably the most important aspect is to sit up straight, to straighten your back as much as possible. It's really nice to sometimes visualize someone you love standing behind you and pulling this string right at the top of your head up, just so you start to feel your spine long and straight. And you feel nice and settled, almost like a stack of coins is running up your spine, and it's just perfectly still. And you can roll your shoulders back once and just let them fall and rest. Nice level position. And make sure that neither one is higher than the other. And make sure that your head is neither tilted up or too far down. And if you need to, you can lower your chin a little bit to kind of get a sense of that, to get a balance of that. Because if you're leaning too far forward, you'll have the tendency that actually triggers the nervous system to like, oh, is it time to go to sleep? And you could fall forward, and you don't want to be leaning too far back, or you're having your head too far back, because you'll be distracted by that. And just let your teeth and lips stay in their natural loose position with your mouth closed. Leave your tongue in its natural position up against your palate, just right behind your two front teeth. And then if it's most comfortable for you to just close your eyes completely, and at the same time you want to kind of be looking down the bridge of your nose. If you do feel more comfortable having them just slightly open and letting in a little bit of light, if you're feeling sleepy or dull, you can do that, but make sure it stays really at that kind of just like a glowing level of light entering your eyes. You don't see anything specifically because that could distract you. And now just relax your face. Particularly around your eyes and mouth. And start to just watch your breath. And what that means is simply being aware of the sensation of air moving in and out of your nose. There's cool air passing through when you inhale, and warm air flowing out when you exhale. The breath clears away that divide between the world outside of your body and the world inside of you. Just inhale and exhale, nice and even. Allow the breath to fill your whole mind. At the top or bottom of the opening of your nose, post a little lookout or guardian. Right there at the opening of your nose. And all that lookout does is just watches the breath come and go. Cool as it enters and warm as it leaves. Stay there, just one place, your breath. That's meditation, one place. Now you're practicing a perfect way to be with your breath. Follow your breath for a count of 10. Count 1 as you exhale. You want to keep counting up to 10 with each exhale. But if you start to think about something else before 10, go back to 1. Just your breath. That's all. Start to relax your focus. Deepen your breath. And slowly open your eyes. What's so beautiful about taking this into your life is that this is what you can do in your own home. You make the sacred space in your home. It doesn't have to be a church or a temple or a synagogue. It doesn't have to be in here. It's where you create the sacred space in your own home. And you say, this is where I'm going to sit, and this is where I'm going to be able to realize the kind of life that I want to. So for those of you who haven't, do that. Find a specific place in your own home and say, this is what I'm going to do here. It's quiet. The energy of it feels very calm. And make that this place where you're going to meditate as we go deeper and deeper into this. Just on a practical note, is some people have been asking me about this. It's good to meditate before you eat, and if you have eaten, to probably wait at least an hour. I mean, it's just amazing how much the stomach can take your focus, after you've had what you'd even think is like so incidental, like 3 cashews, and you suddenly go, and you sit down to meditate 5 minutes later, and it's suddenly like, your mind will find so many things to do with those 3 cashews, Like, why did I even have 3 cashews? I'm kind of still hungry. And you're right there, you're off on something else. So yeah, try to do it before eating. You'll find the sweet time for you to do it. For some people, it really is in the morning. For others, it's at night. For some, it's in the middle of the day. Whatever it is, find the time to do it each day. Do this for the next week. And remember that it's all about quality. It's all about quality. If your experience tonight was that I didn't get past 3 or 2 before I started to think about something else, perfect. You're doing great. Because if most of us are honest, it's like 1, you know? So when I say that quality is that you stay with that. You be honest with yourself, you know, because that's, you want to do that all the way through this practice, is be completely honest. Like, oh yes, I'm just completely not able to stay on this, you know, at all. Because it's when you deny that, then that just creates an even greater obstacle to achieving it. So just be honest with yourself, be loving with yourself, and then we'll start to get into some really even much more amazing meditations. The breath is fantastic, and there are many ways that you could like use that to take you all the way. But now we're going to bring in the subjects to focus on. So it's always good to see yourself, to be aware of what it is that you're trying to do with your life, you know, and whatever that includes, the good and the bad, you know, the ways in which. So just start watching yourself a little bit more this week, you know, and it's just watch how you're acting, you know, and one of the things is that when it comes to your meditation practice, is being able to see yourself giving to it in whatever way to you is powerful, meaningful, and loving. Certainly, you know, obviously on a very practical level here, you know, this is one of the reasons why we do things by donation, you know, because it's all about you seeing yourself give to whatever you consider to be important. So, you know, when you walk out tonight and you see the bowl there, it's like, well, all right, you know, this is how important this was to me, you know, and there's no judgment on that, you know. That's the power of it. And you know, there are people that, you know, that the quarter or the $100 bill, it's just a different form of the same thing. But what are you thinking when you put that in there? That's what matters. That's always what matters. So, but do it for yourself. Do it for yourself. Do it for your practice. And then you'll be able to do it extremely well for others. So thank you so much. Happy meditating. See you next week.